Tell me how the sound goes with this. I don't think it's going to be as good as the other room, but Semitic magic, R. Campbell Thompson. When this passage is taken into account, with the donkey of Exodus 13:13, which is to be redeemed with the lamb, are be killed by having its neck broken, it seems clear that the passage of the unclean beasts has descended from a time when such beasts were held eligible for sacrifice. Okay, where's the note? 1, 2. Okay, the Genesis 12:1. Okay. On the but this last note here. On the grave occasions when this was permissible, on the custom of killing the totem, on occasions of grave stress. See Fraser, Totemism, page 7. He maintains that the totem sacrament has become a well-authenticated fact. Golden Bough, 2nd edition, book 1, page 19. Now, this must have been before the idea of unclean came in, at a time when the various Semitic tribes regarded the taboo beasts of the Old Testament laws as their totems. If this argument has any weight, the parallelism in the case of the firstborn babe is obvious. It was a human sacrifice from those early times when the distinctions between the classes of life, beast or man, were not so finely drawn. There is no necessity to go into details of this kinship between man and beast. It is a well-recognized form of belief, and it shows itself in later ages in entities that are half-beast, and in omens and tales of women bringing forth animals. Well, it's not that simple, but I would agree that it's not really the scope of this chapter. There's nothing new. Fraser has clearly demonstrated that the God of the Hebrews plainly regarded the firstborn of men and the firstlings of animals as his own. And he says, we know that the Semites were in the habit of sacrificing some of the children, generally the firstborn, either as a tribute regularly due to the entity or to appease his anger in seasons of public danger or calamity. Also compare Robertson Smith's Religion of the Semites, 463. Yet it seems absolutely impossible that, at the very early date when the Hebrews and the Arabs lived together, well, they were all Semites, right? Any tribute could have been paid to the entity as chief or king, and even in the form of the sacrifice of the firstlings, which is found among the Hebrews, there seems to be indication that the parallelism with the offering of the first fruit is complete than, at first sight, it seems to be. Nowak, however, in his Lehrbuch der Hebrew Archäologik, well, if you're going to abbreviate it, I don't know all the German words, thank you very much. Weidir Esgebrut van Wiek so gehoren, Jahwe auch die Erstling van den Verfruchten. Okay, then. It is unnecessary to quote at length the well-known instances of human sacrifice at length. Well, I don't know. I think that's pretty interesting stuff. Sir John Marsham, in his 17th century, in his Chronicum, he mentions the instances of the Phoenicians sacrificing to Saturn, one of their dearest people. the Dumatii in Arabia, who in Diodorus says sacrifice a child every year, and other cases of human sacrifice. He gives Porphyry's story that Amasis established the law for the slaying of men at Heliopolis in Egypt. What was the name of Heliopolis? I forget at the moment. You know, the Egyptian name for it, not the Greek name. As Manetho bears witness in his book of Antiquity and Piety, they were sacrificed to Juno and were examined, as were the pure calves that were also sealed with them. They were sacrificed 3 in a day, in whose stead Amasis commanded that the men of wax of the same number should be substituted. Another, also from Porphyry, is the story of Cronus, who the Phoenicians named Israel. It should be Il, who had, by a nymph named Anobret, an only begotten son, and he died. And he, in dread of great dangers, adorned this son with royal apparel, and offered him in sacrifice. Whiston, in his Josephus, has collected the following passages bearing on human sacrifice in the Old Testament: Leviticus 22, Deuteronomy 12, 30, 31, 18, 18, 2 Kings 16, 3, 17, 31, 13, 10, Psalm 106, 37, and 38, Jeremiah 7, 30 to 32, 19, 3 through 5, 32, 35, Ezekiel 16, 20, and 21, the Wisdom of Solomon 12, 4 through 6, and Daumer, the Cult de Moloch. I'm guessing this is French here. 1842. L'ancienne religion de Moïse avant d'être rattachée ordonnée d'entière, sans exception, en fournure de Moloch, Jehovah, les prémices des sexes masculins parmi les animaux et à plus forte raison parmi les hommes. He is excellent in his anthropological comparisons of human sacrifice. Oh, well, he wants to translate the Hebrew and stuff because we figures we don't know Hebrew or Aramea or any of these other things, but he just presumes we know French and German, so okay. The eldest son in Florida. I know of dog sacrifices in Florida. I mean, not recent ones. Well, okay, I guess that's not necessarily true. But although his philology is at fault, see also Gilnay's Les Sacrifices Humains, especially among the Semites, race anthropologists par excellence. Okay. We may, however, mention some additional examples which may be of use in our argument. There is an interesting tradition in Bezold's Schatzolhe, how in the 19th year, sorry, I'm getting rumbly in the tumbly, not speaking right. In the 19th year of Terra Magic appeared on the earth in the city of Ur, which Horon, the son of Eber, had built. A rich inhabitant died, and his son made an image of gold to put over the grave, and posted a watcher. Then came Satan, and took up his abode in the image, speaking to the young man as though it were his father. And one day thieves stole everything belonging to the young man, who came to his father's grave in tears. Satan thereupon promised that all should be restored, if only the young man would sacrifice his little son, which he did. Then Satan came forth and entered into the young man, and taught him magic incantations, divinations, Chaldeism, destinies, haps, and fates. And from that time on, men began to sacrifice their children to demons and worship idols. There are also stories of such sacrifices among the sapiens. And Nadim 1:5, Chwolzen de Schreiber 2:28, MC de Percival 2:101, quoted Hughes' Diet of Islam, mentions a Ghassanide prince who was sacrificed to Venus by Munthler, king of Hera. Becelus of the 11th century, the Common Era, in his dialogue on the operation of Damans, speaks of the sexual orgies among the Yucata and the Nosti at the time when we celebrate the Passion of our Lord, and how they sacrificed their unnatural offspring 9 months later. Sounds like some jealous priest. Well, the ones that have sworn themselves to celibacy, that is. The existence of human sacrifice among the Babylonians and the Assyrians is not easy to prove satisfactorily. Jeremias considers it to be the probability of the Babylonians practiced human sacrifice secretly without formally taking it up in the recognized worship, a remark which I may confess I am unable to understand fully. Is it meant to apply to those people at all periods of the 4,000 years in which you know of them? What should be their object in practicing it secretly? The remark seems to be such a vague and unsubstantiated depreciation of the enemies of Israel that it is no help to any scientific investigation. I keep messing up with the angle, sorry. In 1875, Professor Sayce published 2 texts which he considered prove the existence of human sacrifice among the Babylonians, but his views were combated and refuted by Ball in 1892. One of these texts was from an Omen tablet, which Sayce translated. When the air entity is fine, prosperity, on the high places, the sun is burnt. This, however, is incorrect, and Ball's translation, though not exact, was accurate enough to disprove the sacrifice theory. The reign of Ramon is violent. The sprouting grain on the ridges, or terraced slopes, is minished and laid bare. The second text that is given in the book on page 210, and Professor Sayce maintained as late as 1902 that his interpretation still held good, is seeming to show that the firstborn of man was included among the sacrifices that were deemed acceptable to heaven. This depended on his translation of Uristu, offspring, which Ball, in 1892, had challenged and substituted fatling for it. Hence, we have as yet no proof of human sacrifice from Assyrian ritual tablets. I think if it was not acceptable, somebody somewhere might have done it as a crime. The text runs, Enumu, Elu Adad, Pishu, Enade, Shaguam, Ina Kisla Mes, Esachar, Torur, Arur, and is therefore reference to thunder, not rain. This last word, Arur, I should prefer to translate, is scorched. Baal's interpretation is diminished. Esachar is perfectly correct, as it's a word frequently used in these texts, in this connection. Gifford Lectures 467 says, even were the meaning human offspring possible, there would then be no support that it meant firstborn. I think, however, no one, on reading the incantation, can now believe that there's any question of human sacrifice. Again, a great deal, too much stress, I think, has been laid on the witness of seal cylinders. It is frequently very difficult to explain the subjects engraved on them, and the representation of the slaughter of human beings, even when an entity is shown to be present, is not necessarily human sacrifice. It is doubtful whether the seal cylinders published by Menant or Ball, where the evidence of such a custom can really be admitted as final proof. That many of them depict the slaying of man is quite clear, but this can be shown to be sacrifice. But that this can be shown to be sacrifice is quite a different matter. Yeah, a lot of the Christians and Jews make it sound a lot more common than it really was. The fact is, human sacrifice, and some other people who wanted to disparage cults aside from them, it wasn't, the Christians and the Jews weren't the first people who said this sort of thing dishonestly. The fact is, human sacrifice goes out in proportion as civilization comes in, and probably by the time men are able to commit the religious ritual to writing, human sacrifice has ceased to be a regular or periodic rite. Oh, come on, it's got to be occasional at some point, right? Not that I'm saying to go off and do it. It may appear sporadically as an occasional occurrence in historic texts, but it will probably have been entirely eliminated from any written ceremonial which represents the belief of the majority. When a conqueror has himself portrayed human captives in pieces before his entity, the reason is far more likely to be diplomatic than religious. Well, I don't usually hear diplomatic in a positive sense, but at any rate, it is far different. It's a far different form of sacrifice from a propitiatory offering of one's own tribe, which was probably a custom descended from a cannibal feast. The more civilized a community, the more abhorrent does human sacrifice become. And just as the Assyrians were the highest civilized of all the Semitic nations before our era, so, in proportion, will be the fewest traces of this custom exist in their records. Hence, it is extremely improbable that any ritual be found describing human sacrifice or any record that proves its existence, except as a sporadic occurrence. Well, let's be real. In religious society, people believe that everything worth doing is to be done in the name of their spirituality, according to its principles and all that. So, when they go to war, even if it's a just war, let's be honest, that's a type of human sacrifice. It may not be, oh, we have to kill them just so our God gets things killed for it, or people killed for it. That's not quite the point that most groups that would do this would have. And by just war, that how strong that is depends on what culture, right? From the ancient tradition, trying to see how much time I have left. From the ancient tradition, we may turn to the modern customs. Among the Jews in Palestine, the firstborn son is redeemed today, as of old. A priest takes from his parents the price of this redemption, the sum being about 18 shillings, after the receiving which the priest holds the money over the head of the child and says in Hebrew, "This instead of that, this in exchange for that, this in remission of that. May the child enter into life, into the law, and into the fear of heaven. May it be God's will that whereas he has been admitted to redemption, so may he enter into the law, the nuptial canopy, and into good deeds. Amen." And then he places his hand on the child's head and gives the priestly blessing. Both hands are kind of like that, which is probably the origin of the whole Spock thing. I must have watched it with a family member that was like that program, so, because you put the two hands together, to form the sheen. So, it is significant, by the way, that the modern Semites, while they do not lay their hands upon the head of the sacrifice, in ordinary cases, yet they do lay their hands on it if someone else kills it. Because according to the biblical law, touching the animal is one of the things that you must do. If you don't pay for the sacrifice to be made, if you're not doing the sacrifice yourself, you have to lay your hands on the animal. But it's also said that everybody lays their hands on the animal in some cases. So, but these are three ways that we know the Christians aren't telling the truth about their Jesus fulfilling that covenant. There's more to it than that. But at a shrine near Beirut, sheep, goats, and bullocks are sacrificed in payment of vows. The formula used is, "I kill this sheep as a fidyu for Abdullah." The slayer dips his index finger in blood and daubs it on the forehead of this one for who the vow is made, and he steps over the blood. Now, of course, if you're not familiar, the sort of action of offering a sacrifice in the name of other than God means that the person doing it isn't Muslim. So, modern Arab fidyu ceremonies offer a close parallel. The servant of the chair at Zebedani related the following: "The mother of a boy, when she slaughters a sacrifice vowed on his behalf, takes some of the blood and puts it on a skin. They call the sacrifice fidyu. Taking the blood from the place where the sacrifice is slaughtered is equivalent to taking the blessing of the place and putting it on the child." Now, there's doing things on people's behalf, or you've been hired by such and such to do this, and some people feel like they have to say it that way. That's a different story. But Islam doesn't take part in the smearing of the blood, and you have to kill the animal in the house of worship, and no, that's somewhere else. But you don't kill them in front of other animals, and that. Anyways, there's more to these things than that, but I guess in a couple months there's going to be a lot of animal sacrifices, so it's good to mention this as, this is a program that's going to take people a while to get through, probably. Similarly, they go through the opening surah of Al-Quran, address the spirits, Al-Aktab. Therefore, if they're invoking and evoking other than God, you could evoke those present, the reaction, but, when you're calling up spirits or calling down angels and that sort of thing, this takes someone out of the fold of Islam. And say, "This is from thee and unto thee, God. And, O God, receive it from such a one, the son of such a mother, as a redemption fidyu in behalf of him." This sacrifice is as a sacrifice of thanksgiving, looking backwards, In Arabia, if one sacrifices for health, the death of the ewe or goat they think to be accepted in exchange for the camel's life or his own life, life for life. In Syria, they kill animals on behalf of the dead, for the spirit, calling them fidou. These sacrifices go before the deceased as light, to serve him in the next life, as he approaches God, becoming a kafara for his sins. The sacrifice between the feet, is made in Palestine on behalf of a pilgrim returning from Mecca, Jerusalem, or for someone who has gone a long way away from home. Medina is also one, and I've said before that Damascus is considered in some cases to be an acceptable pilgrimage in Islam. It's certainly an important place mentioned. The pilgrimage aspect, questionable. I think there's narration somewhere. There's a narration somewhere. I'm not sure about its validity, but it's definitely a mentioned place as a sacred place. Anyways, the ceremony consists in a sheep or a goat being slaughtered for the one who returns. Just before he enters the door of the house, he stands with his legs spread out so that there is room for the victim to be placed between them. The victim's throat is cut, and some of the blood is put on the forehead. If he is a Christian, it is marked in the sign of a cross. At Rome, according to Ovid, each father of a family, as the festival of the Lemuria, this was in May, came around, and all was still, arose and standing, with bare feet, he made a special sign with his fingers and thumb to keep off any ghost. Thrice he washes his hands in spring water, then he turns round and takes black beans in his mouth, with face averted spits them away. As he spits them, says, "These I send forth, with these beans I redeem myself and mine." Well, I had to be hospitalized for a couple nights over some beans that I wasn't told had to be, they said, "Oh, cook them." Well, yeah, I'll cook them soft. I didn't know that the rest of it was absolutely necessary, for toxicity reasons. Anyways, bean-related story. There's a story of Al-Numan, surnamed Abu Qaboos, who, in a drunken fit, ordered 2 of his intimate companions to be buried alive. When he came to himself, he was so grieved that he set aside 2 days, on one of which he sacrificed whomsoever he might. Meat, and sprinkled the blood on the monument he erected to them. On the other, that he met him, was dismayed with safety and magnificent gifts. I don't know why someone would comment on the Quran with this one, but yeah. I feel bad about killing my friends. I'm going to kill other people too to make up for it. What type of sick individual decides to do that? When a man finishes a house, he makes a sacrifice on the doorstep as a redemption for the building. Every house must have its death, a man, woman, child, or animal. God has appointed a fidou for every building through sacrifice. If God has accepted the sacrifice, he has redeemed the house. In Borneo, there is a custom of making holes to receive the posts, and men are killed and placed therein, so that the house being founded in blood may stand. Compare Joshua 6:26. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay the foundation thereof, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up the gates of it. The Malays sacrifice a fowl, goat, or buffalo in such a case. And yeah. Again, this is not an Islamic custom. According to an Orthodox Muslim, on moving from house to house or on occupying a new building, a man will kill the fiddu the first night that he sleeps therein. The object is bursting forth of blood unto the face of God. It is for himself and family of redemption. He keeps off disease and jinn. Let's look at Surah 22:39. Is that the verse that condemns this, the whole thinking behind that process? Well, there's other verses related, but the Sheikh of Kafr Harib, above the Sea of Galilee, explained to Mr. Curtis that the people sacrifice a victim on the threshold for the new house, because every place, land, or spot on earth has its own dwellers, lest one of the family die in the land. Because it is not theirs, they may redeem a family by fiddu, one or all. For the sacrifice of a tent, on the building rights, see, tell us what they are. Don't just give us references to Gitti's, Medocinis, and Satori's das Bauopfer, in whom's, if a man has bought a new house, and its inhabitants had been unlucky, the owner will make some change, such as taking up an old stone on the threshold and laying a new one in its place. Then the sacrifice is offered on that threshold, the people calling it, presenting a kafara. And don't let the use of Arabic terms confuse you about that whole thing being Islamic.